I'd like to talk directly to my listeners from the United States. You have a problem. Your government is out of control. Specifically, it is out of your control. Now, I understand that Americans are very patriotic people, because the ideals that America was built upon are very noble and they are incredibly laudable. There is a lot to respect about the founding fathers of the United States, but I'm going to tell you directly, now, unequivocally, unilaterally, there is no debate. You do not live in that society anymore. It no longer exists. I'd like you to come with me and have a look at some of the things that are in mainstream media. Now, I am aware that the American media is a big fan of the term conspiracy theorist, so I'm going to use mainstream media outlets. These people are not conspiracy theorists. These people are reporting the facts, and I want you to please put aside the heady thrill of patriotism, and I'd like you to actually examine this as if you were a non-American. I'd just like to stress that there will be Americans listening to this who are not like that, and I'm not trying to lump you in the same category, but I've had too many dealings with Americans who are blindly patriotic and are quick to naysay anything that they don't want to personally believe. If you're not one of these people, then please don't take umbrage at what I'm saying. To be honest, I imagine you're probably on my side on this issue. The United States is, on paper, a republic, which means it is a representative party democracy. As I understand it, this was deliberately chosen by the founding fathers of the United States because they were afraid of mob rule. They were afraid that violent mobs would be the determining factor in American policies, and I can understand why they took measures to prevent the direct influence of that. I think they did this because they didn't have a central bank. Because central banks are key to oligarchical regimes. As Thomas Jefferson said, a private central bank issuing public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army. We must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. These are very wise words, because what this means is that people become servants of the power structure without choosing to become servants of the power structure. And it is a foe so intangible there is nothing to swing at, especially as, even if you do, the governments that are propped up by central banks will fight to defend them. A recent study by Professor Martin Gielens and Professor Benjamin I. Page has concluded that the United States is an oligarchy. Your average citizen has almost zero say in the policies of the state, whereas a very small group of people control it all. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you are saying, well, there's no surprise there. But the thing is, you tell yourselves that you're a democracy. You are not a democracy. You are not even a republic. You are now an oligarchy. Even if there are republican mechanisms still limping along, these are just in name only. The de facto power is with these very, very wealthy individuals. You are currently in the position that the Senate was in after Julius Caesar had won the Civil War. The Senate exists, and it may well still have an opinion, but it didn't matter. What Caesar said mattered. Now, he was just one man, therefore he was a dictator. You have a small cabal of people, relatively speaking, who are controlling the state. Therefore, it is an oligarchy. In pre-revolutionary France, 3% of the population owned 30% of the land, and the remaining 97% were more heavily taxed than this 3%. This was over 200 years ago, and the primary method of acquiring wealth was through land ownership. In the modern United States, the top 1% own more than the top 3% owned in pre-revolutionary France. Now, I'm no economist, and these may not be directly analogous, but I do think there is definitely something to be said for these figures. Even Warren Buffett, the billionaire financial investor, has stated that the rich need to be taxed more heavily, because like in pre-revolutionary France, they are not taxed as heavily, proportionally, as the poor. He knows what's happening. He says that billionaires have been coddled by Congress. Now, we all know that that is a euphemism for served by Congress. But he can't say that. I think he also knows that these sort of levels of wealth inequality lead to revolutions. I'm not going to go into the collapse of the dollar, because there are plenty of videos that can detail that far better than I can. But honestly, I don't see any other alternative at this point. There is no paying back the trillions of dollars that America is in debt. And if something can't continue on indefinitely, it won't. The oligarchy of the United States is well aware that a revolution is on its way. They're not stupid. They are malicious. They have been stockpiling billions of rounds of ammunition that they are not able to use in war, and is more expensive than the rounds that would be used for practice. There is only one conclusion that can be drawn from this, and that is it will be used to quell domestic disturbances. And on the subject of domestic disturbances, let's have a look at what America's police force has turned into. Now, this isn't every policeman in America, but the rise of the paramilitary policeman is a very grave concern. There is a reason the police forces should not be decked out in black armour, unadorned, with face coverings and military-grade machine guns. This is intimidating. This is worse than the Gestapo. They wish they had access to these things. This is a Nazi's wet dream. And don't give me any of this reductio ad Hitlerum nonsense. This is what is actually happening. This is not exaggeration. These men are armed like this and dressed like this, and they are given military training to respond instantly. All of this equipment has been donated by the US government's Department of Defense. Over $4 billion worth of equipment has been distributed by the Defense Department to municipal law enforcement agencies, and they have also handed out $34 billion in terrorism grants to local police forces without oversight, to apparently fund counter-terrorism efforts. Which obviously begs the question, what does the US government consider a terrorist to be? Well, this is a long list, but I'm going to go through each and every one with you, just so you are aware. These are all documented cases where counter-terrorism legislation has been used where it obviously should not have been used. Being young, reported or doing journalism, speaking out against government policies, protesting anything, questioning war, criticising the government's targeting of innocent civilians with drones, asking questions about pollution, paying cash at an internet cafe, asking questions about Wall Street shenanigans, hoarding gold, creating alternative currencies, stocking up on more than 7 days of food, having bumper stickers that say things like "Know your rights or lose them," investigating factory farming, infringing a copyright, taking pictures or videos, talking to police officers, wearing a hoodie, driving a van, writing on a piece of paper, and not having a Facebook account may soon be added. Having opinions is now also enough to get you classified as a suspected terrorist. Being frustrated with mainstream ideologies, using social media, valuing online privacy, supporting Ron Paul or being a libertarian, liking the Founding Fathers, being a Christian, being anti-tax, anti-regulation or for the gold standard, being reverent of individual liberty, being anti-nuclear, believe in conspiracy theories, a belief that one's personal and or national way of life is under attack, impose strict religious tenets or laws on society, insert religion into the political sphere, or those who seek to politicize religion. Supported political movements for autonomy, being anti-abortion, anti-Catholic, anti-global, suspicious of centralized federal authority, fiercely nationalistic, a belief in the need to be prepared for an attack, opposing genetically engineered food, or finally opposing surveillance. The US government is abusing these terrorism powers that it has granted to itself. As you can see, the definition of what a terrorist might or might not be is incredibly fluid. It can change at the whims of the oligarchy controlling the United States. It's hard to find a pattern between all of these incredibly disparate things, but there is one. They are all events or actions that can challenge the status quo. Because when you have a phenomenally wealthy oligarchy in control of a powerful and populous country, the last thing they will want to do is allow that power to be questioned. This is why anyone can now be determined to be a terrorist, a label that would quite easily assuage the guilt of anyone who happens to do something highly immoral to someone who the state has labelled the terrorist. Of course, you may think that paramilitary police, funded under counter-terrorism legislation and for the express purpose of fighting terrorism, might in fact be designed to protect the US from an invasion, because they are so powerful that there is no way any terrorist organisation on Earth could challenge them. But who would invade? Well, certainly not the Russians. NATO has been advanced right up to the Russian border, and is currently surrounding it via Turkey on the Western Front, and they seek to include Ukraine and Georgia into that alliance as well. NATO was created as a counterbalance to the Soviet Empire, but now that's gone, NATO has been absorbing countries that were formerly Soviet right up to the Russian border. But Russia has allies too. Russia's two most important allies at the moment are Syria and Iran, which is why Vladimir Putin went to such lengths to protect Syria from an American invasion. You'll notice, looking at this map, that Iran is completely surrounded by the Americans. They have Iran absolutely locked in a death grip and have been beating the war drums for years. The problem is, Iran hasn't given them a pretext to invade. The US has the Middle East so sewn up, there is literally no room for Russia to maneuver here. There is nothing they can do. But you might be thinking, what about China? Well, aside from the fact that the Chinese economy is so inextricably linked to the American economy that a war between them would seem ridiculous, the US is preparing for it just in case. The US has moved 60% of its fleet to the South China Sea. There has been a standoff, of course, but more will be in place by 2020. With the South China Sea and South Korea currently occupied by the United States, Russia's eastern flank and China are currently surrounded. This is a map of American military deployments around the globe. South America and Africa are too impoverished to be of any importance, and they pose absolutely no threat at all to the United States. The important parts to control, however, are the Suez Canal in Egypt and the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, along with the Panama Canal, which you'll notice the US already is occupying. The US has got very strong forces in Europe, and as well as European backing, to prevent any kind of Russian invasion, as well as strong forces in Turkey, the Middle East, Inner Asia, Oceania, Japan and South Korea. This means the US has encircled Asia with its forces, and even penetrated into the interior past Afghanistan, and can attack from any point. The leadership of Russia and China are well aware of this. They are undoubtedly very, very worried. There is no one on Earth who has any chance of invading the United States. As we can see, the United States has encircled the only two countries that are still great powers. In 1889, the British Parliament passed the Naval Defence Act, which formally embraced the two-power standard, which was the doctrine that the United Kingdom operated under at the time. The two-power standard was that Britain would maintain a fleet as large as its next two competitors combined, for if they then decided to join forces and attack Britain, Britain would be on an equal footing with them, and so always capable of competing for its dominance in the Pax Britannica. The United States is following the same doctrine, only now it's not with numbers, it's with money, because the world has changed. The United States government spends $640 billion a year on their military. China and Russia together spend $275. This is why the United States Navy is so powerful compared to the rest of the world. Of the 19 aircraft carriers in the world, the United States has 10. In total, On the seas, the United States has 3.3 million tons of battleships. The Chinese do not even have 1 million tons. The Russians do not even have 1 million tons. And this is without any of the United States' own allies. According to Chalmers Johnson, a distinguished military veteran, CIA consultant, and author of the book Blowback, which I highly recommend, the United States has over 1,000 military bases around the world. The US also spends billions on research into new technologies, and these are already in the news because the US has drones. Now, I'm aware that other people have drones as well, but they do not have the technological sophistication of the US, neither do they have the numbers, as the US has approximately 800 unmanned aerial vehicles, as well as other forms of drone robots that the US is developing. These unmanned aerial vehicles are capable of launching highly accurate and highly explosive missiles miles away from their targets, from incredibly high altitudes. The US has got superlative satellite capabilities and would easily be able to spot a buildup of troops in any area. The US forces around the world are tripwire forces. They are for the US to be able to anticipate or delay any form of invasion from any direction, so its enormous drone fleet will be able to fly over at very high altitudes, likely undetected in a lot of cases, and bomb the hell out of all the millions of men that China and Russia would put into the field. The US only maintains around 350,000 active infantry personnel because there's no point employing more. They can do what they need to do with technology. This is a doctrine that the US operates under, and it's called full spectrum dominance. Now, whether the US has actually achieved full spectrum dominance is yet to be established, because it hasn't been tested. The numbers on paper are so overwhelmingly in favour of the US that it seems foolhardy to try. What do you think this has done to the opinion of the US government? It has given them a sense of invincibility, and understandably so. Why would you not think you were the greatest power that has ever been, if you are in fact the greatest power that has ever been? Of course, I haven't considered nuclear warfare yet. I think most people's conception of nuclear warfare is two countries with vast stockpiles of nuclear weapons fire them at each other all at once, and the whole world is blown up. This isn't what would happen. The United States, Russia and China all possess extremely large nuclear arsenals, but there has been a marked increase in anti-ballistic missile technology, because nuclear weaponry is delivered via intercontinental ballistic missiles. They aren't particularly fast, and they are very large. They are not that hard to shoot down. Now, no one knows just how effective these missile shields will be. Would the United States spend all the money they do on them if they were unfeasible? I think not. The US military is equipping itself to be able to take on the entire world. This is its standard. Even if the entire world were to unite in arms against the United States, I'm not sure I would put my money on the rest of the world. I know it sounds ludicrous. I know it does. But can you honestly tell me, with everything the United States government is doing, that it does not look like that is their objective? The question we must ask now is, who is doing all of this? And I'll be honest, I can't tell you, but I can tell you how many people are doing this. 3.5 million people hold secret government security clearance, according to the most recent figures from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. 2/3 of those, about 2.7 million, are government employees. About 580,000 are contractors. Another 1.4 million people, including 483,000 contractors, hold higher level top secret security clearance that gives them access to more sensitive information. This is a secret army of bureaucrats and probably military contractors who are running the private empire of the United States government. You may think that is a bold statement, but think about what has happened to the people who have spoken out about this culture of secrecy. Bradley Manning, in jail for 30 plus years. Edward Snowden, in exile in Russia, being protected by the Russians because he told everyone that the US government is taking all of their data and storing it for future use. This is what happens to people who speak out about this clandestine power structure. They are persecuted and imprisoned or hounded to the United States' primary competitors. This is the world we live in. This is the United States in 2014. This is something you have to know. The United States government has persecuted people who have told the truth about its activities. There is no going back from this. This is the revealing of its hand. This is its true nature. And it all happens because of one word. Classified. Because these things are classified by the US government, they are not known to the public. And with the absolute saturation of nonsense in the media, and I'm sure everyone is aware that the media is controlled by this handful of oligarchs that are controlling the United States, there is never going to be a change. And so these motions, these movements, all of the things the US government has done have been whitewashed. They have been forgotten within minutes. But if you just put them all side by side, you are looking at a fascist government. I don't know how else to describe it. It is the merger of corporate and state power, without question. But not only that, it is totalitarian. It persecutes the people who reveal it, who challenge it. Now, I'm not saying that the United States government is in a position to combat the entire world yet. But I honestly think that is the trajectory that they are on. That is their goal. I think they are aiming for world domination. And it seems that they're going to do it at any cost. The constant provocations, the constant wars and invasions and lies and hypocrisy. How can anyone stand this anymore? This is why I have made this video. I am not attacking the average American, because I know from personal experience that Americans are good people. But they have been led by the nose, using this secret framework under the guise of it's classified, to the point where they don't know the extent of what's going on. The US government has turned their own good intentions against them. Are you patriotic? Of course you are. Well, this is classified, and if we told you, then our enemies might find out, so you can't know. And being a patriot, I imagine you, Mr. Average American, think, well, I'm sure they're doing it for the best. They're not. There is no evidence to suggest they are doing anything for the betterment of anyone else but themselves. And it is the word classified that is allowing all of this to happen. I don't know if this is beyond the point of no return. There's only one way to find out. The Bundy Ranch incident was very interesting. It showed that the United States government is not willing to massacre American citizens yet. I am sorry that I had to make this video. I would much rather take the piss out of people. But every single day I see another red flag go up. To a historian's eye, all of this is shocking. There is no way you can say, well, none of these things matter because it's the United States. Any government can succumb to tyranny and fascism, and it looks different in every country. Do not fool yourselves. There are bad times ahead.